Welcome to the Concord Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel Delgado. I'm joined today with Pastor David Rayner, and in this episode, we interview Jordan Thompson.
Yeah, I'm hoping our members are going to be really encouraged as we get to talk to Jordan, and particularly just thinking about the way that him and his wife, Hannah, serve the next generations here, serve in selfless ways, and steward the gospel that's been entrusted to them in such a beautiful way to others.
Yeah, I think you'll definitely be encouraged, and you'll hear where that comes from as he grew up in a home that not only just went to church, but really lived the lifestyle, and that really planted a seed for him to carry that faith on and pass it forward to not only church, but everything he does. So let's hear some stories. Thank you for doing this. I'm excited to hear your stories. Let's start just by hearing kind of your background and how you came to know Christ.
Sure. First, thanks for having me on and inviting me. This is something I've been looking forward to ever since we had the chance to talk. And,
cool.
had the chance to think about some of the things that are important in my story. And so I'm Chattanooga born and bred, born and raised here, and had the privilege of being raised in a godly home, a Christian family. My dad has been in full-time ministry my entire life, and at two different churches here in Chattanooga. And so fortunately, growing up, Christ's name in the home every day, church, ministry, fellowship with other believers is the only thing I ever knew.
Yeah.
And what a blessing, as I look back now, what a blessing that has been. And I realize that when you think about people wanting to share their testimony and all the things that I was saved from because of the blessing of a godly home and parents that loved me and pointed me to Christ and consistently, faithfully disciplined me. And I'm sure that there was a lot of days where they were tired of doing so, but I do have a great family that has loved and supported me well. And I got saved at an early age. Woke up really early one morning and saw my dad doing his devotion. I think I was around 6 years old, and just asked more and more questions, and I prayed there. And I do think I had a pretty full understanding as far as a 6-year-old could have at that time. But my faith really didn't start to really become my own until middle school. And I got baptized right before that. I think it was about 5th grade when I got baptized. And when I got into middle school and through the ministry in the youth group and some of the camps that I went to, I started to really understand what it meant to make the faith my own and not just, well, this is what mom and dad do and I go to church and I do this, that, and the other, but realizing that at some point it has to stop being, well, this is what my family does and this is what I do. This is why faith in Jesus Christ is important to me, and how is it going to affect my life? And so through middle school and high school, I felt like there was steady growth and growing pains. I had another really unique opportunity our family did to go on a lot of short-term mission trips as a kid, starting from when I was about 6 or 7 years old, all the way up till I was about 11 or 12. My dad was involved in a ministry of through our church, building a Bible training center in the Bahamas on an island, Eleuthera, Bahamas. And we were there a lot. I was homeschooled in elementary school, and so we had a lot of flexibility, and we got to be there a lot, my older sister and my mom and dad and I, and being able to be on the ground floor in a ministry like that. As I look back, I see like what a awesome opportunity that was, and how special that was. And that's still a ministry we're closely connected to now. And I actually have the chance to go again in a couple of weeks to that training center and
wow, right
do some work. That place is such a special part of me that's actually where Hannah, my wife, and I went on our honeymoon, because I wanted her to see this place that awesome. I'd been to. It's probably close to 30 times. And, the people there are very special to us. And we have a lot of lifelong friends. And to be able to look at a ministry and see my dad would hate me using this type of terminology, but to see a ministry that his fingerprints are all over, and all the blood, sweat, and tears that he sunk into a Lutheran Bible Training Center, and being able to go and see people that are still directly impacted because of the work that he did is really special, and something that I think I definitely count as a blessing now as I look back. And so got to be involved in that middle school, high school, and had the opportunity to go to a private Christian school here in town. Got to go to a private Christian college here not too far away, and having the opportunity to be around so many gospel-centered places was very formative for me, and something that I think is a true blessing. And the older I get and the more I look back, the more I see it as just a blessing from the Lord.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love your testimony. I love your story, particularly, especially coming from a home of believers. That's not always a guarantee that you're going to come to faith yourself, right? Just because it was your parents. You mentioned you had to kind of realize that you had to make that faith your own. But I love that you kind of came to faith, just kind of stumbled upon your father's quiet time. I think that's really cool that it was just kind of an organic thing that came up. It wasn't like a, hey son, let me sit you down, let's open our Bible. It just was a part of what happened every day at your home as your father spent time with the Lord, and you saw that, and it sparked curiosity. I just love that. What was it, or was there a catalyst? Because you mentioned it, kind of around that middle grades age where you realized that you needed to make this faith your own. Was there a catalyst to that, or you remember something sparking that within you to know that there's a difference between your faith and your family's faith?
Yeah, that's a great question. I believe it was either going into my 6th grade year or my 7th grade year at a camp, one that I can really think back on. And I think it was really during that week that I realized, I've got a lot of biblical knowledge. I know all the answers. And I believe I was a Christian at this point, but I started to realize at some point it's not about like, hey, everyone sees me as I'm one of the good kids at church, right? I'm always in Sunday school. I know how to find all the books in the Bible. I know, I have good friends that come from good families. In the end, all that stuff is okay, but it's not, all those things don't really have a bearing on eternity, right? And at some point, just having the knowledge and the things to say and the activities to do, while good, are not necessarily what's most important for your eternal soul. And so I started to think, okay, how can I own this in a way that will be long-lasting, and not just because even at that age, I can remember, seeing older kids that would go through our church, go through the youth group and be really involved, and then they would graduate and leave, and no one would ever hear from them again.
Yeah. And
I know that's reality in a lot of places. And luckily for me, not only a godly parents, godly dad who was always an excellent example, but a lot of older people in my life that were not in my family that were great godly influences, like small group leaders, people that worked in the youth, people that were at my private Christian school. And I know that that's one of the main indicators for someone that won't fall away from Christ once they go to college and move out of the home, is other influences, other godly influences in their life that are outside of their family that are having a godly impact on them. And knowing that now was one of the reasons why I chose the vocation that I'm in, and I work at a private Christian school, the same one that I graduated from, and I get the chance to be around 11, 12, and 13-year-olds every day in what I do. Yeah. And, it's not a church, right? It's a school, But everything we do there is discipleship driven, gospel centered, and now I get to be, I hope, one of those other influences in kids' lives outside of mom and dad that can help anchor them to the faith. That's my goal anyway.
Yeah, man, that's so incredible to hear you talk about just God's blessing in your life, looking back and seeing just how He preserved you and, put so many people in your life to influence you and see you paying that forward. That's incredible, man. It's really encouraging to hear that.
Yeah, as I'm listening, two questions come up that maybe you've already answered, but I think about we have very different testimonies. I had a little more, it's kind of the opposite, where I rebelled and turned my back against the Lord. And so I've always prayed for my children to have a testimony like the one you just mentioned. And so I'm curious, this is part of maybe they're related, maybe they're not, but you talked about observing your dad, at 6 years old, and what a good example he's been. Question one, as a pastor who is a dad, I'm constantly concerned about the damage that could be done, as kids being overly familiar with church and churchianity, and dad's a pastor. It's just something we do. And so in your life, it seemed like that was not a detriment. It was actually something that was beneficial to you. So the first question is, did your dad excel in how he led by example? Was it a lifestyle? Is that why it was attractional to you? Because it wasn't just detached words that didn't have any, they weren't played out in front of you. And then the second question is it just the grace of God, or were there particular means that you see? We've talked about this in the past, just before. You never rebelled, really. You never had this season of life. You were athletic, played basketball in scholarship. I mean, so the typical turns that people often make when they go off to college, or if they're the cool kid or you're an athlete, you didn't fall into any of that. Does that go back to your dad's example and all these influences you just talked about? Or are there particular, just the Lord has protected you and given you a bent and circumstances that never made that part of the direction you went in your life?
Good question. As far as the rebellious phase, I'm glad my mom's not here recording on this podcast, because I'm sure she could give plenty of examples of 7, 8, 9-year-old Jordan where there was definitely a rebellious spirit. I think with my dad, there was a great example of just the way that he lived, but he had a lot of really intentional conversations as well. And he made sure that and this is something he shared much later. I think I was just out of college, and he was sharing with me just some stuff of his journey in ministry, and he learned very early on church ministry is important, and God uses pastors and elders and things like that. But if you're not winning at home, you're not winning. And I think it can be a temptation for a lot of people in full-time ministry to just sink, 95% of all their energies into the church and the church body, and then family kind of gets the scraps. And that was never the case with him. There was definitely times where he wasn't around because there was functions or whatever, mission trips. Obviously that happened. But I don't think my sister and I or my mom felt like there was this gaping hole a lot of the time because, well, dad's at church, or dad's away, dad's on a mission trip, dad's doing this, that, and the other. So he had a great work-home balance. So I think he was intentional with those types of things, and he's a very methodical man in the way he thinks things out, more so than I. It's something I got to grow in. But we had, I can remember him saying, when a lot of people kind of cringe when their kids are in middle school or in high school, and it's like, oh, we just got to trudge through it and get through it because it'll be better on the other side. I heard him say multiple times, well, the teenage years were my favorite years parenting. And that was, thinking back now and working with teenagers full time, it's like, wow, what a statement that is. But I think that he wanted to put in the hard hours, the intentional hours, early and often, with my sister and I, and that's what he did. And you know, I've told people many times, if there's anything that you see that's ever good in me, it's the Holy Spirit. And I've had a mom and a dad that have prayed for me consistently my entire life, and I have a wife that prays for me. And anything that's outwardly good is going to be just the Lord wanting to bless those people from their prayers and their investment in me, I think.
That's awesome.
Oh, I love that humility. So I want to kind of get to how you came to Concord, but before we leave this subject real quick, what advice would you have for someone that's grown up in the church and that is going off to college? Because kind of like what David is saying, it's so easy to fall away. So what were the things that kept you tethered to God while you were separated maybe from your church and your family?
Sure. Great question. I think that whenever you do leave the home for the first time, and I was still, I went away to school. It was an hour away, so I could really be home just about any time. But I spent most of my life there, obviously. But anytime you leave your bubble and your little incubator and you're out, being intentional in finding godly relationships to plug into, and making sure that there's intentional church involvement, and making sure that you're still gathering with other believers, because at the Christian college that I went to, it was a great school, but I could have found anything as far as a sinful lifestyle. I could have gone and found that there as well if I was looking for it. You'll find what you look for, and if you're looking for godly accountability at a place like that, you'll find it. If you're looking for a place that, well, hey, I'm going to go off and mom and dad won't know what I'm doing here, and so this will be a safe place where I can go and just explore and sow my wild oats and then move on, you can find that too. And so being intentional with the relationships that you build immediately, and not say, well, I'll go to church, or I'll make sure I find that later. Finding that very soon and intentionally was important for me. And I've met some of my greatest friends that I met there, godly men now, I'm still in contact with, that were, great friends then that were of like mind with me. And they were athletes too, but they had the same commitment to wanting to live in purity and staying away from the party scene, and making sure that we could hold each other accountable in that way. And those were important relationships for me.
Yeah, that's great. So tell us how you came to Concord.
Great question. And it was definitely a journey. I went to two other churches here growing up, really just one. And when my wife and I, Hannah, got married in 2010, we wanted to start looking for a church that we could call home, right? And, she was already a member of a church here. I had been a member of a church here for a very long time, but we wanted to find a place that would be for us. Yeah. And it wasn't that we thought either of the churches that we were already a member that were bad churches. It was, hey, we're starting a new life together. We're starting our own home. Let's find a place together. And it was definitely a lot of growing pains along the way, because I think over the course of 9 months, I bet we visited 10 or 11 churches. It felt like more in the time. We were all over the place, and it was hard going, and it felt like we would go and I would feel great about it, and she would be like, I'm not so sure, and then we'd go to another place and she would really like it and I wouldn't feel as comfortable there. And the only way that I can explain our first Sunday here was just peace from the Holy Spirit when we walked out. And I can still remember some of the first faces that I saw when I came in here. It was very welcoming. Obviously, I think our pastors here have always done a great job of cherishing the word, holding it up, treating it well. That happened on the first Sunday and has happened every Sunday since. And so that was attractive to both of us. And it felt like when we walked out those front steps after the first time we were here, we just kind of looked at each other and, I mean, it was like a peaceful exhale. And the Spirit is the only reason that we felt that. And Concord has been a blessing for us and our family ever since. And ever since we felt that, we knew, okay, we're not going to just kind of dip our toe in the water and see like, hey, is this maybe the place? After that first Sunday, said, okay, well, we're going to find a Sunday school class. We're going to find a small group. We want to get involved immediately. And that was something that was really important straight away to get plugged in immediately. And just been thankful to be here for over 11 years now.
Wow, it's incredible.
Can you elaborate some? I'm trying to remember back to me hearing this story for the first time in Mexico. And I think you said, I might be misquoting this, but I think you said this was the most humbling experience outside of, I think, salvation, marriage, childbirth, that joining Concord was one of the most humbling experiences among those kind of things.
Yes.
Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
And that has stuck with me since. And I've even, as recently as in the last couple of weeks, the Spirit will remind me of that in those fleshly, mundane moments. What a blessing it is to be here. Because I know, too, what a blessing it is. I'm humbled to be here. But do you mind elaborating on why you said that?
It's definitely true. When we came, my wife came from a Presbyterian background. And so when she was baptized as an infant, we knew that coming to a Baptist church would mean for her to be rebaptized as a believer. And so that was something that we had a lot of conversations with, a lot of late nights talking about. And when we came here and we both felt that peace about being here, we both knew what that would mean for Hannah. And her doing that in submission and humility to our church and to her husband was like, it totally rocked me in a very powerful way, because I realized I already knew what kind of wife I had, but just affirmed like, wow, this woman is a tremendous blessing, and one that I don't deserve, but the Lord gave me anyway. And it's something that I definitely have still thought about, and just the way that as soon as that happened, we had made the decision this is where we were going to be, and she knew that she was going to go through the baptism process again in front of the church body to say, hey, I'm a baptized believer in Christ, and I want to identify with him publicly with you. That was just a pretty emotional and powerful experience for me to see her do that, and she has walked in humility every minute here since that time.
Oh, that's awesome.
I love Hannah and I love you, but I got to say, she got baptized at Concord. She got wet before.
I'll make sure that she listens to this part in the podcast. Sam will make sure we'll note the minute and second mark.
So talk about how you've served here at Concord, and how's the Lord grown you since you've been here?
We've been involved in a lot of different ways. I think one of the first teams that I served on was the greeting team. Hannah and I both did that. We've helped. She served in the women's ministry team here for a couple of years now. I've had the chance to serve as a deacon in 2 different stints, working with the finance committee for 4 years, and right now I'm working with the tellers committee. And so, and then other deacon duties on top of that. It was definitely a very humbling experience to be approached and asked about becoming a deacon. I think the first person that asked me about it, I made sure that he found the right Jordan to talk to when he talked to me about it. And but our pastors here have been an incredible encouragement and blessing to me ever since we've been here, and just a place where I have continued to go to for advice and encouragement and accountability. And this is, it's been a blessing to serve. It's been a privilege to serve here in multiple different ways. And now the longer that I've had the chance to do that, it's an extra time commitment. There's more time here. There's things that, you're expending a little bit more energy here. But now that we have kind of made that both Hannah and I just kind of made it our mission to serve here wherever we can. I can't imagine church involvement without that aspect.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's your prayer for Concord?
My prayer for our church, as I was thinking through that question, there's a lot of things that I think I could say. We're so blessed to be in a very healthy church here. And I've been blessed to be in healthy churches really my whole life as far as deep involvement. And so it's kind of hard for me to fathom what an unhealthy church looks like. I know they're there. I know we have them here in our town. They're all over the world. That's unfortunate, but it's true. And so sometimes I think I'm tempted to maybe take it for granted what it's like to be, what a blessing it is to be in a healthy church. And so I think that my prayer for our church is that we would continue to be missionally minded and think outside of ourselves. And it's something that I think churches like ours can be tempted to become inward in that this place is such a wonderful place to be. And it's so like the church body here is so encouraging and really tight knit. And we have great teaching, we have great preaching, we have great small groups. The relationships, the fellowships here are rich and fulfilling. That when all those things, the way that they are, it can be a temptation to just kind of live inside the bubble. And I'm definitely a person that leans towards finding what's comfortable and sticking there. And the Lord has given me a wife that has helped me get outside of my comfort zone. And that would be our prayer for our church, that we would look for ways to advance the gospel, promote the gospel, even if it's not in a comfortable way, because it rarely is, that we would look for more ministry opportunities, the people that maybe think like, oh, well, I'll try a mission trip later. Think, well, let's think about why you couldn't do it right now. Because I'll tell you, when I'm presented with an opportunity, to my detriment, one of the first things that I think of is, well, here are the reasons why it wouldn't work. And is it good to be cautious sometimes? Sure. But it's also a way for you to just settle into a rut and a routine and what's comfortable and say like, well, I can try that later when everything falls into a nice, neat little box. And it rarely happens that way. Yeah. And what we've started to find is that when you step outside your comfort zone and take steps of faith, then the Lord goes, okay, you're willing to do this. Now I'm going to go before you and make sure that all these boxes get checked for you. And so, but taking a step out of your comfort zone and taking a step of faith towards something like that opens you up to the Lord showing you blessings that you otherwise wouldn't get to see.
Yeah. That's awesome, man.
I've seen y'all do that over the last several years that I've been here. I'm grateful for, because I know you're not going to enumerate on all the ways, but it's been a blessing to my family and other families to see you and Hannah receive the blessing of being invested in, like you were mentioning earlier, part of your testimony, and then now in turn, on top of the deacon and all the different ways you've served the adult body, I now see you taking that and not just saying, well, my job, I'm pouring into students, you're now having, kids come over to y'all's home, so hospitality, investing in teaching them. So in a sense, really paying forward the way that you've been invested in stewarding that gospel into the lives of the next generation that's blessing my kids, my family, and multiple other families as well. And then exactly what you just said, like actually stepping out in faith and going on mission, leaving the hurdles of leaving your children behind, and even missing birthdays for the sake of being among the nations and obeying the Lord in joy. And then seeing you really love family, friends, invest even when it's painful and difficult, the way that you've been in the trenches and in the valleys of some of the hurts and difficulties of family members for the sake of serving them. I just want to say that I thank God for the way that I see him at work through you and Hannah and your family. We're grateful that y'all are here.
Amen. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you were encouraged. If you were, share this with somebody you know, and make sure to share your story as well. And we'll see you on the next episode.